Hello, everybody. This is the chairman, Nathan Noss. I'm from the chair with Nathan and Tonette. I'm doing a recap for the week in pro wrestling. Monday, we were at WWE was in Montreal once again as a follow up to Elimination Chamber. Montreal crowds are always insane. Um, they have been ever since the 1997 Survivor Series. The show started with Sami Zayn coming out to a enormous ovation. Um, then he said he was sorry because he didn't win the title, and he felt like he let everybody down. But then he realized that he couldn't take on the bloodline alone, and he would have to talk to one person. So he called out Kevin Owens and told Kevin Owens that they could team up and take out the bloodline. Kevin Owens said he didn't need his apology, but if he needed help, maybe he should look for his new best friend, Jey Uso. Uh, then on the way out, Baron Corbin attacked Sami Zayn, said that his days are going to get worse. They ended up having a match. Again, Corbin lost. Don't really know what they're doing here. Thought maybe they're going to go back to the uh, maybe Bob Corbin, but then again, who knows? Uh, then uh, they had Bobby Lashley come out and say that he wasn't going to be pushed around by either Brock Lesnar or Bray Wyatt, mostly talking about the fact that Brock Lesnar low blowed him and got disqualified at Elimination Chamber. Then Omos was on and challenged Brock Lesnar for a match at WrestleMania. Um, and then, which will be answered this Monday. Uh, then, and I apologize, I don't remember all the matches because this is Saturday. I'm gonna work on different ways to remember all this stuff. Um, and then Becky Lynch, or they did a ding dong hello segment with Bailey. Surprisingly, they fixed the door since NXT, so that was interesting. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that was the same door that uh, Gigi Dolan went through at the hands of JCJ. Uh, so they had Damage Control on there with Bailey. Talked about how they kind of dominated the tag team, how Becky Lynch, that part was over. Becky came out and said maybe she'd want to be the Raw Tag Team Champions. Although, would you really call it the Raw Tag Team Champions since they can defend the titles on any brand? I've always kind of thought that was an interesting point. Um, then Becky said, "Who said I'm coming alone?" I'm kind of paraphrasing. And then Lita came out. Lita said she also would like to be a tag team champion. And so now, this coming up Monday, we have Lita versus and Becky Lynch versus Damage Control for the tag team titles. And as much as I'd like to see Becky Lynch and Lita win the tag team titles, I don't think it's going to happen because the rumored match at WrestleMania is Becky Lynch. Is Damage Control versus Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler. Although I don't know how that one works because WWE doesn't always like to do heel versus heel tag teams. And I don't know if you're going to do Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler versus Damage Control, which will be the face, but I guess we'll see what's going to happen. because it was supposed to be Brock Lesnar versus Gunther, and now it's going to be more than likely Brock Lesnar and Omos. So everything can change. Then they had Edge taking up Austin Theory on. Let me back up for a minute. Then they had Mustafa Ali take on Dolph Ziggler. And a lot of people would think that would just be a throwaway match, but it really wasn't. The match ended in kind of a cool way where Dolph went for the famouser, and Mustafa Ali did a handstand, countered it, and then popped back up and got him into a crucifix roll up and got the win. I thought the move was awesome, kind of unexpected because it happened so fast. And I'm happy that they finally gave Mustafa Ali a win. Asuka took out Nikki Cross, again playing into her darker side, and next week she'll take on Carmella, primarily because it was Carmella and Asuka that were the final two in the Women's Elimination Chamber. So then the main event for Raw was Edge versus Austin Theory, because Edge answered Austin Theory's challenge for the United States Championship. Great match. Austin Theory did actually show me something, as much as that pains me to say. He has improved a lot since being the United States champion and being on the main roster. Back and forth match. Edge hit his usual spots, great as ever. Then, of course, Finn Balor showed up, got up on the apron. Edge knocked him off, went back to Theory, but then Balor distracted Edge one more time. Edge and then Edge and Balor hit heads. He kind of staggered back into the A-Town down, and Austin Theory is still your United States champion. After the match, Finn Balor did 3 coup de grâces on the Edge, and that's how Raw ended. As a grade for that show, I'd probably give it maybe a B-. I thought it could have been and I forgot one segment. There was a segment between Cody Rhodes and Paul Heyman. Heyman wasn't there. He was on the Titantron because he was selling the neck injury that he got at Elimination Chamber at the hands of Kevin Owens. But then, and it was very quick. And I had heard rumors later in the week that the reason that was because they were afraid that the Montreal crowd would be cheering for Sammy, and they didn't want that to overshadow Cody Rhodes. That's why Heyman got on there so fast. Now let's move on to NXT. NXT was a decent show. They continued the split between Von Wagner and Robert Stone. Tony D'Angelo went to the back and kind of provoked Von Wagner into a match, and then beat him with, I believe it was some form of a rock bottom, probably because he can't use that swinging cradle fisherman suplex because of his knee. Robert still looked even more frustrated, so I see a split going for them relatively soon. Gallus and Pretty Deadly still had their thing. Gallus destroyed Anafe and Blade. And then Trick Williams lost to Axiom, but it was, to Yeah, to Axiom. But it was a great match. Trick Williams has actually showed me something. Um, and then the main event on. Oh, and then Schism kept their storyline going with Chase U. Uh, Thea Hale is becoming more of a focal point, especially in this storyline with Ava Rain, or Ava, because I heard they changed her name. Although I would have kept the ring because it made it sound cooler. Um, Something was said or done a few weeks ago to Thea Hale. She's like freaked out now every time she sees Ava Rain or Schism. Like I said in previous videos, I'm not sure why, because she kept saying they're coming, but Schism's already here. So I'm not 100% sure what that means. Uh, then the main event was JC Jade uh, defeated Indy Hartwell. And then at the end of that match, Gigi Dolan showed back up after taking a couple weeks off to sell the door shot, reminiscent to Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty in the barber shop. Um, then Sol Ruka, who has one of the most innovative finishers. If you guys haven't seen that on YouTube yet, go look it up. Her name is, again, is Sol Ruka. She challenged Zoe Starks to a match. Said she won another match against her since she lost against her a few weeks ago. Then Nikita Lyons told us that she would be out for about 12 months, so equivalent to about a year after being attacked and tearing her ACL. Then Ivy Nile lost to Alba Fire. Anxious to see Alba Fire and Island Dawn in an actual tag team match to see what they can do. Then the main event was for the NXT Heavyweight Championship, Braun Breaker versus former WWE Champion Jinder Mahal. Jinder Mahal was Jinder Mahal. He hit all the moves. Braun Breaker, for all the criticism he gets, is one of the most gifted wrestlers I've seen in a long time and definitely holds up to the Steiner name. I do think, though, it's about time for him to drop the belt. I don't know to who, maybe to Carmelo Hayes at Stand and Deliver, because that's what it seems like they're trying to do. The reason I say he needs to drop the belt is because realistically, if he beats Carmelo Hayes at Stand and Deliver, he's beaten pretty much everybody on the NXT roster unless you bring somebody down from Raw or SmackDown. So that's why I think that should happen. Then, as Braun Breaker was celebrating, the screen started to kind of fade out like there was technical difficulties. And then it showed you that Grayson Waller was in the video truck, i.e. what DX used to do. And he called out Shawn Michaels and said that he's doing what Shawn Michaels used to do, and he's the new Shawn Michaels. And challenged Shawn Michaels to meet him at Stand and Deliver, which is the Friday before the first night of WrestleMania. And so I heard earlier today from Ego that Dragon Lee might be used as a substitute for Shawn Michaels since in this feud with Grayson Waller, since Shawn Michaels obviously can't wrestle anymore. Which I think Grayson Waller is very talented, and him and Dragon Lee would have a uh, very good match. I told Tonette earlier, who's on assignment right now, that I believe that Grayson Waller has all the athleticism of a young Shawn Michaels plus the mic skills of the Miz. So, I mean, that's high praise, or maybe even the mic skills of a Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect. Uh, so, I think if Dragon Lee wrestled him, that would be amazing. So, we'll have to wait and see. I don't think Shawn's going to get back up the ring just because he's always said he wouldn't. Again, after the Crown Jewel thing a few years ago. And I don't know if his body can handle it. Grade on NXT would probably be an A minus. Could have had a few more women's matches. They only had the one with JC Jane. The women were on the show, but that was the only women's match. Then you had the one thing I forgot to mention is you had Roxanne Perez and I can never pronounce her name. The Empress, the former NXT UK champion Miko Satomura, training together, and Miko showing Roxanne how to get in touch with her inner warrior, like from her heart, and they're actually facing each other for the NXT Women's Championship this week, so that should be interesting. Now on to Dynamite. Dynamite was a good show. They had the tag team battle royal, and again, I apologize if I'm missing some matches. I'm gonna start writing these down as we go. After I watch them, so that way I'll have a reference point. Still learning about this podcast stuff, so they have the tag team battle royal to determine who would be the third team on at Revolution. And it ended up being Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal, which I'm not too happy about because we've already seen them take on the Acclaim. Backstage, you had the Guns trying to broker a deal with Jeff Jarrett and Sanjay and Satnam. Satnam played a big role in this match. There were multiple times where Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal both were about ready to be eliminated, and Satnam would stop him and push him back up onto the ring apron. So I thought they should have had maybe like Alex Reynolds and John Silver or Top Flight or somebody like that. Get a shot. Somebody that hasn't gone against the Acclaimed or the Guns before. I mean, I know we haven't seen Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett go against the Guns, but we saw it twice where they went up against the Acclaim when the Acclaim was the tag team champions. Then you had John Moxley take on Evil Uno in the main event. Again, bloody match, but Evil Uno showed me some stuff. John Moxley ended up getting the win with the Bulldog choke and choked Evil Uno out in a pool of blood. Kind of reminiscent to Stone Cold at WrestleMania 13. Then you had Christian come out to try to explain what he had done with to Jungle Boy the week before, but this time Jungle Boy got the jump on um Christian, hit him with a spear, and then went to the back, got 2 chairs like he was gonna do um uh a concerto, but he waited too long and Christian hit his knee. Then Christian took him out and hit him with a concerto. So apparently, I would guess they're setting up a match between them either as a last minute match at Revolution or maybe the night after, um, or the Wednesday after. I mean, and then uh, it was announced earlier in the week that Tony Khan would have a major announcement. Well, the major announcement was actually done by Adam Cole, baby, and he told us that sometime in March there will be an AEW show 1 hour after AEW, so it's probably taking the time slot of Power Slap. Once that one ends, that's called AEW All Access. So it'll basically be a documentary series about your favorite AEW wrestlers and kind of a backstage look about what they do to prepare for a match. And then it said that it'll talk about Adam Cole's concussions and like his road back to recovery. He also announced that on the night that All Access debuts, that Adam Cole will be returning to the ring. So I'm kind of excited about that. Always been an Adam Cole fan. It was announced that on next week's Dynamite, there will be Hook versus a mystery partner of Stokely Hathaway's choosing, which we found that out on Rampage, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then next week will also be the Casino Battle Royale to determine the last team and for the tag titles at Revolution. And then we also had Bryan Danielson come out and say it was great to be back in Phoenix because him and Brie used to live there. For those of you who don't know. And then MJF came out and said that he had lost the one person in the world that he had loved. He got down on one knee and proposed, and then she left him. The internet's speculating that based on everything on social media that MJF had broken up with his fiance, since she's deleted everything about him, pictures and otherwise. So maybe that was a little bit of truth in there because I know MJF likes to stretch it a little bit. So AEW as always was really good. I would give that one an A- because I enjoyed the Battle Royal and the Jon Moxley match. I also liked the Wheeler Yuta Orange Cassidy match for the Mid Atlantic Championship. I thought Wheeler Yuta showed a little bit more edge, especially after he got slapped by Claudio Castagnoli. So maybe the whole Blackpool Combat Club is maybe taking a little bit more of an edgier role. But the question I have about the Blackpool Combat Club is who's the leader now? Because you have Jon Moxley doing this thing with Hangman. You have Claudio waiting to find out who he's going to defend the ROH title against at the ROH pay-per-view on the 31st. Then you have Wheeler Yuta, who's going after singles titles, even though he's already the Ring of Honor Pure Champion. So you don't really have a clear-cut leader unless you say John Moxley, which would be my guess. Um, so I would give Dynamite an A minus. Could have been better. I didn't like I said, I didn't like the fact that they had Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal with the Battle Royal. Thought there was a little more deserving competitors than that. Now let's go to Impact. I would talk about MLW, but they're still on Reels, and I don't have that channel. I do know the only thing I know from MLW is that John Hennigan, aka John Morrison, aka Johnny Nitro, Johnny Impact, whatever other name you want to call him, showed up and is going by his real name, John Hennigan, for now. Then, and he'll be facing Davey Richards for the MLW Openweight Championship. So that should be an interesting match. So Impact was interesting. It was just basically a build for No Surrender, which took place on Friday. And I'll get to those results in a minute because I looked those up today. Some of the things that were interesting was Joe Henry did a meet and greet and signed some autographs, talked some crap about Moose, and I'm really starting to get into the Joe Henry character. And yes, fans, I believe in Joe Henry. I would clap, but that's a little bit hard for me. The matches were good. They had a beat the clock challenge between Tommy Dreamer and Bully Ray, which for what they were going for, the Bully Ray, the whole beat the clock thing was kind of stupid. But you got to fight about who's going to talk first. What are you, like 5 years old little kids? But whatever. So Tommy Dreamer or Bully Ray ended up winning the beat the clock challenge because the good hands Skylar and Hodge distracted Apender Gujar, and my apologies if I butchered that name. And Bully Ray wrapped the chain around his hand and knocked out Gujar to get the win. Tommy Dreamer had set the clock at 1:15. So, I mean, that was probably the only way he was going to be able to win it that fast. The main event kind of was, and then Sami Callihan and Dieter took on Yuma Urahara. I'm really bad at Japanese names. And Frankie Kazarian. The match was going good, and then Sammy was going for the Cactus Driver 97. But then Dieter wanted the tag. Classic, leader of a faction. But as Sammy was going for a tag, Dieter dropped down, refused to tag. Kazarian got Sammy in a crossface chicken wing. Sammy was crying out for help. The design did nothing. And Kazarian Urahara got the win. Then, excuse me. Then, in the back, Sammy asked Dieter what the hell was going on. Why didn't he help? And Dieter said his fifth proving point was to put all his faith in the design. And by losing, he showed humility, because we all know how much Sami Callihan hates to lose. And they said that at No Surrender, Khan would take on Frankie Kazarian, and then he would be tested again. The main event was a Monsters Ball match between Trey Miguel and Crazy Steve. And for those new viewers who don't know what a Monsters Ball match is, they stay in a room for a whole night and most of the day with very little light, no food or water. And so they're all kind of disheveled and kind of worn out by the time they get out there. And it's anything goes, barbed wire. The match went back and forth. They used barbed wire. They used thumbtacks. At one point, uh, Crazy Steve hit a Canadian destroyer into the thumbtacks, which I thought was incredibly insane, but in some ways very entertaining. Um, Although I do agree with what CC said, in a lot of ways that didn't need to be done. Those things don't need to be done, but they are. So it was a good match. They brought out, they called the barbed wire 2x4 something else, but I'm going to call it what Cactus Jack called it, which was uh, Barbie. And so that was used on Trey Miguel. Trey Miguel did a move on to the barbed wire spider web that they've used before in different wrestling matches. But the only part that kind of sucked was they had the cutters for the barbed wire, but the pile driver that he did broke the wood, and nobody really got stuck inside the on the barbed wire. So I don't know if that was supposed to happen or not, but they were both down. Trey Miguel started convulsing. Then he got the win. So Trey Miguel is still the X Division champion. Crazy Steven made the statement that win or lose, he would leave them alone, or Trey Miguel alone. So it'll be interesting to see who's next to challenge Trey Miguel for the X Division championship. So yeah, that was Impact. It's hard to grade that one because whenever you have a show that's a go home show for a pay per view, there's a lot of build and interviews and stuff like that. So I would give that one a B just because I thought there could have been, instead of so many interviews, there could have been more wrestling. But I understand it. Then we're gonna go to SmackDown, and let me go to No Surrender really quick. I didn't actually see the actual pay per view because I don't have Impact Plus or the Ultimate Insider. I just have the regular Insider for Impact. But I do know that the Death Dolls retained their titles against Hex. Mickey James beat Masha Slamovich to retain the Knockouts Championship. And Josh Alexander in a very rare sports face versus face sportsmanship match took or beat Rich Swann. We do know, however, who the next challenger will be for Josh Alexander, and that'll be Steve Macklin, as Steve Macklin won the Fatal 4-Way to determine the number one contendership. And then, again, I didn't see it, but based on the highlights that I saw, and Joe Hendry beat Dancing Moves for the to retain the digital media championship. There was one part in that match on the highlights that I thought was hilarious, which at one point, Joe Hendry went under the ring and got a VR headset and put it on Moose, and Moose started dancing. And everyone was kind of confused on what he was dancing at, but what he was, and then Joe Henry showed it on the screen, and what it was like some strippers or some dancing girls, and then it went into the dancing move song that Joe Henry created. Um, so I thought that part was kind of funny. Frankie Kazarian beat Khan. Um, no involvement from Sami Callihan, so I don't know what they were talking about on Impact, so that was a little bit strange. Uh, so yeah, from what I've heard, I think No Surrender was a pretty good pay per view. So let's go to SmackDown. A lot of stuff happened on SmackDown. It started off with the 6-man tag, which was Braun Strowman, Ricochet, and Madcap Moss versus Imperium. Uh, Back and forth match. And then all of a sudden you had Drew McIntyre come out to down the aisle and just kind of stand there, kind of like what they used to do in the 80s when they would announce that they wanted to challenge for a title. So shout out to WWE for that kind of throwback. And then the match was good. Uh, Imperium got the win when Gunther powerbombed Madcap Moss and got the 1-2-3. McIntyre was going to get the ring, but he was and then Sheamus came out to help McIntyre against the Viking Raiders. And because the Viking Raiders interfered, Braun Strowman and Ricochet got upset, although the match was over. And so then it ended up being Drew McIntyre, Braun Strowman, Ricochet, and Sheamus against the Viking Raiders and Imperium. And then all the faces kind of stood tall. They had a segment with Rey Mysterio and Santos Escobar. Still don't know what to think about that. I would love to see Santos try to be a face, but there's a couple of reasons why I don't think it's going to happen. One, it seems too fast, although I know WWE, primarily in the Vince McMahon era, was really quick about changing their mind. So maybe he has some input in that, even though he keeps saying he has no input in creative. Then so Santos talked about the digital exclusive that they had showed where Ray and him exchanged masks. And for those who don't know, the Mysterio and Descaris names are legendary in pro wrestling or in Lucha Libre. So that happened. Then Dominic showed up with Bobby, which is Rhea Ripley, and told Ray to fight him. Ray refused. Actually, he didn't say anything. He just kind of shook his head. And Santos Escobar said, if you don't have respect for a legend like Rey Mysterio, I'll fight you. But they never said when that was going to happen, although I'm assuming maybe it'll be next week. Then they had Natalya versus Shayna Baszler. Natalya was still kind of injured, so Shayna got the win pretty handily. I mean, Natalya had some offense, but you get into a match even halfway injured with somebody like Shayna Baszler, and it's usually not a good idea. So, but then and then Natalya was accompanied to the ring by Tegan Knox. And after the match, Ronda Rousey got involved because she was at ringside also, and they were gonna go try to break Natalia's nose again, but Tegan cut Ronda off with a flying forearm between Ronda Rousey uh, and Tegan Knox, which I think will be a good match. But the line that Ronda Rousey used was kind of cringeworthy. She called Tegan Knox Skittle hair, playing off the multicolored hair that Tegan Knox has, and then said that she was going to make Tegan Knox taste the rainbow. So it's just more proof that Ronda Rousey needs a guy like maybe Paul Heyman to talk more. Uh, then they had the match between. They had a face to face with Charlotte Flair and what was supposed to be Rhea Ripley. They ended up coming out and touting Rhea's accomplishments and saying how she was going to win at WrestleMania, and then he kind of switched tactics and started flirting with Charlotte Flair. And Charlotte Flair used a line acknowledging Andrade, saying that she had a real Latin man at home that called her mommy. Then, as Charlotte Flair was about ready to go to get at Dominic, Rhea Ripley showed up and they did a stare down. Still intrigued about that match, although I think Dominic needs to kind of stay out of it and just let the ladies do their thing. Then they had the match between Karrion Kross and Rey Mysterio. Good match. Rey had more offense than I thought he would, mainly because I thought he would be distracted with everything that had been going on that night with Dominic. Then, as Rey was going for the 619, Dominic came out and blocked it, which caused Rey to get pulled out. The referee was distracted. When Rey got in, he got the cross hammer and then the cross jacket. So Karrion Kross got the win. After the match, Dominic got in and kept taunting his dad to hit him, much like what Owen Hart did with Bret Hart going into their feud in 1994, I believe. So I see a match between Dominic and Rey Mysterio at WrestleMania. Then in the main event, it wasn't really a match. It was Jey Uso trying to get some answers, Jimmy Uso trying to get some answers from Jey Uso. But instead of Jey Uso, Jimmy got Sami Zayn. And Sami Zayn said that Jimmy was the first one that gave him any support in the bloodline. And it's not too late for Jimmy to join him and help take out the bloodline. Jimmy came back and said that Sami had turned his back on the bloodline and that they had given him everything in the past 6 months. Then all of a sudden, as they kept talking about Jey Uso, he actually walked down the crowd, from the crowd, i.e. the Shield. But he didn't go anywhere. Then Jimmy kind of tapped in the corner, come stand by me. And as he was distracted, Sami Zayn hit him with a Haluma kick. So he was down. Then Solo Sikoa showed up, so Sami Zayn bailed into the crowd himself. Jey Uso didn't move much. He got down to the ringside barricades, but just kind of stared at his brother and Sami Zayn. So they're really dragging out this story, and I kind of like it. And then it was reported that Roman Reigns will be there next week because if Jimmy wouldn't have taken care of Jay, so that's kind of intriguing. I'll give SmackDown an A. I thought that was a pretty good show for the first SmackDown after Elimination Chamber. I like the cross promotion for WrestleMania between Dominic and Rey Mysterio. So even though I think, that Rey's probably just going to beat the crap out of him at WrestleMania because they'll be pushed too far. Then you had Rampage, where the first match on Rampage was the Young Bucks versus the Aussie Open. And that match was phenomenal. I mean, it was back and forth. It took about the first 20 minutes of the show. And the Young Bucks ended up getting the win with a super kick. But again, I would recommend going back and looking at that match because it reminded me how good a tag team match can be. Then you had Toni Storm versus Willow Nightingale. Toni Storm got the win. And then Saraya and Toni Storm were going to spray paint Willow. And Ruby Soho showed up and made the save. As Saraya and Toni Storm were running, leader showed up. So, and then they kind of like ran around her and got away, which was a little bit strange. And then you had Sammy Guevara versus Action Andretti. But before that, you had a video package with Swerve Strickland and his Mogul Industries, which right now is just Parker Boudreaux. I'm not sure where Trench went. Kind of interesting that they just debuted him and then he kind of disappeared. Talking about if Keith Lee and Dustin Rhodes wanted to fight, then they're all for it. So I look for that match pretty soon. Although the look from Keith Lee reminds me of like a Fred Flintstone meets Slim Shady kind of look, which is kind of weird. But maybe he's got a cool new jacket, and I've always liked Keith Lee's entrance and wrestling style. And so I'm intrigued with that. Sammy Guevara got the win. I don't know what's going on with Action Andretti. Ever since he beat Chris Jericho, I think Tony Khan's kind of lost interest in pushing him as far as, fans thought he was going to. It was announced that Hook would be taking on Ethan Page, which I think is kind of a weak choice because they had built that up on Dynamite as being like a huge surprise. And even though Ethan Page is a good wrestler, that's not much of a surprise to me. But it should still be a good match. They announced that there'll be a Face of the Revolution ladder match with Eddie Kingston, Ortiz, AR Fox, Lucha Sensation Commander, and Konechka Takechka. So I'm intrigued to see that this coming up Wednesday. Again, they'll also have the Casino Battle Royale tag team match to determine the last entrant at Revolution. Rampage was actually really good. That tag team match, like I said, really showed me something. So I would give Rampage probably an A plus. I thought the matches flowed well, and that was probably one of the best Rampages I've seen in a long time. So that was my recap for this week in wrestling. Thank you very much. I will see you on the From the Chair podcast with Tony and Tonette if she's back from her assignment and her spending time with her family. So thank you very much, and I'll see you then and next week for some more recaps.